Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's Friday the 20th, and we've got some good training going on related to getting in and starting meetings with federal buyers. Let me just turn off some of my little scroll bars there, etc. We're going to get started in the training in just a second, but I like starting every training off with a tip as a way to say thank you to those showing up early and on time, for engaging in LinkedIn and saying hi to everybody. When you do that, first off, I appreciate it because as a trainer, I like to have an audience that I can speak to, right? And then the second thing is when you show up early and on time and start getting engaged in the chat, it lets LinkedIn know something's going on over in Neil's training. Maybe you should go to that training as well. So it invites more people in, and I appreciate you being here to do that. My tip for you today is sometimes I tell people you need to do social selling, get engaged on LinkedIn, put content out there, etc. And that might be a stretch for you if you haven't really got into the habits yet of doing that. But one thing that you could do every single day that would take you literally less than 5 minutes a day, but begin to increase your visibility and presence on LinkedIn and within the government contracting community, et cetera, is come into LinkedIn and just give a thumbs up to one thing, right? You can start with my stuff because I post stuff that always attracts other government contractors and government buyers themselves, right? So that's an easy button for you to do. Just go to my profile, hit the bell notification, but then you can sit there and begin to expand that. So for example, say you're trying to sell to the Navy, go connect with one of the Navy LinkedIn company pages like PEO Digital as an example. They put out content pretty frequently, and all you have to do is go in there and give it a thumbs up if you're trying to sell to the Navy and PEO Digital as an example. When you do, first off, you start getting practice, but second, you get visibility to the perhaps the Navy people who are tracking on it, but especially to anybody else who comes along and views. If you ever look at somebody's post and you see that they got, let's say 20 or 50 or even 100 thumbs up, when that happens, it means they got thousands of views, right? So if you look at my post from even this morning, I posted one this morning. It has about, I don't know, 60 engagements or something. Like here it was a vote, so people are voting. But the amount of views I've got is over 3,000, I think. And that's a lot. Imagine people at a booth when they're walking by. My point is, if you give a thumbs up to some post in the Navy on LinkedIn and 1,000 people are coming in, sometimes they stop and they click and they see who gave it a thumbs up, et cetera. They're comfortable looking, but they don't want to give their own thumbs up or something. But they saw you. And when that happens day after day after day, you really start beginning to increase your visibility. You also begin to increase your comfort about being involved and engaged on LinkedIn. So that's my tip of the day for those coming in early on time, throwing out TGIFs. I don't know what that even means because I only work days that end in Y, and it seems like I'm always working. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. I love seeing the chat. I'm going to move away. I want to share my screen. So let's get started talking about how to get in with federal meetings. Let me just get to my deck. In this training, we're going to talk about the one thing you can start doing that will help you start having meetings with federal buyers, right? And soon. One of the things that I talk about is there's passive marketing and active marketing. Basically, you can wait for somebody to knock on your door, or you can go knocking on doors. I absolutely believe that you should be ready, that if the buyer comes knocking on your door, like this little money bags, that you're ready to answer that door. But don't just wait for them to come knocking on your door, right? You need to go knock on their door. When you knock on their door, you're taking responsibility for the relationship between you and federal buyers. I talk about take responsibility in order to gain control. I don't mean take responsibility as in take blame. The reason I'm not having meetings is my fault, not their fault or their fault, right? Really, instead I'm saying it's my responsibility to get the very meeting that I want. I don't need to wait for the other person. If I wait for the other person and I say it's their responsibility, then they're in complete control of whether I have any success. So what I'm saying is that I want to take responsibility for the relationship and the meeting that I'd like to have. And now I'm in control. Now I can do things that will enable me to have a meeting. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's training. I'm going to cover down on it in a couple of different ways. I want to first put meetings in perspective, right? Why are they so vital to our success in the federal market, but really in anything you're trying to do? Meetings are vital. And so I want to cover down on that. And then I really want you to understand Stephen Covey, and right here, I don't know if you can see it. I know I'm in a tiny little window, but I'll hold it up anyways. The book I recommend more than any other book for business book or personal book really is The 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And in there, Stephen Covey talks about seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so the second thing I want to get into is helping you understand how buyers see you, right? You know how you see yourself and how you want to be seen, but do you understand how they see you? And that's what we're going to talk about in the middle part of today's training. And then I'm going to wrap up with what you can do to start getting meetings scheduled, right? That's the whole idea of today's training, really, is the one thing you can start doing that'll start helping you get meetings. So as we move forward, that's what I'm going to cover down in today's training. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for your success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results, and that's what I want for you. If you don't know this, we are self-funded. We are not funded in any way with the government. We're not affiliated. Sometimes I get people confused because the quality of our material that we put out and the fact that we put it out free, they think we're funded by the government and they're somehow affiliated. We are not. This is self-funded by me and sustaining members because I spent 20 years wishing I had better guidance on being a small business owner and being in the federal market. So now I teach every single thing I know for free, right? If you want to work with me, that's great. But all I do is help you get things done. How to do it, we teach for free. And sustaining members are one way we're able to keep bringing this training back to you. And I'm going to start just shouting out sustaining members during every training. I want to just shout out one person and say thank you as we move forward. So today, I just wanted to thank Ross Jocelyn or Trey. And you can see him in the chat. I put him in the chat, so you should be able to go over into the chat, scroll up somewhere, and you'll see I put it in. I put his profile. Go click on his profile, connect with him. He's open to connections. Everybody who's really everybody who's here is open to connections. But go give Trey a little love and say thank you for being a sustaining member, or just thank you, Trey, into the chat would be awesome. And then also, I want to know who you are. I want buyers to be able to know who you are and to remember you. So put your company name into the chat. Your core competency, 2 or 3 words that let us know who you are. Get that into the chat. That way, as you're engaging in this community and you're putting your own information in, you can see other people who are in the chat. Right now, we've got almost 50 people. It's a Friday, right? But typically on our training, we have 50 to 100 people live every single day. And I want you to be able to engage with those people. It's not just about learning. It's about also engaging and building your network. Okay, so let's start diving into the meat of the training. And one thing in particular I really want to focus on first is why meetings are so vital, right? You would think that sometimes you don't even have to talk about this. We all know, oh, meetings are this vital. But do we really know that? I used to teach training classes and I talk about communication. And the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it took place at all. And this is why I tend to explain things a lot, is because I don't want there to be this illusion that we communicated on, for example, what meetings are. So I teach the 7-step process for federal revenue success. You can see it here if you're able to look at the screen. The 7-step process for federal revenue success begins with research, which is this idea of understanding an agency better than they understand themselves. As you do research and you've got a good understanding of who they are, where you want to go in there, you then need to identify people. And we call this targeting. You're basically building a list of people that you would like to reach out to that you hope are going to get you further into an agency, get you closer to winning opportunities. And so after you do targeting, that second step, you're moving into what we call outreach. You might also think about cold calls, but really this is just your first meeting. If you've never had a meeting with somebody before, that's outreach, right? That first time you're having a meeting with somebody to see if it even makes sense to have a second meeting, to see if they'd be willing to do that. And the reason for doing that is it leads to strategic relationships. That's the 4th step in the 7-step process. Strategic relationships are where you really want to go. This is the purpose of trying to get meetings, is so that you can identify people within an agency that you can build relationships with. So when you have these strategic relationships, you're able to hear about slam dunk opportunities that fit in your space, and then able to write winning proposals that allow you to hit your sales goals. So that's the 7-step process. In meetings, they fit right down in the middle, developing those relationships, getting those relationships started. You can also think about meetings around opportunities, right? Sometimes we have an opportunity we're trying to pursue and we need to get in the door, and you need to get those meetings what we're talking about today is along those lines as well. How can I get my capture questions answered? If I want to write a really good proposal, a winning proposal, then the best proposals are ones that are fed from conversations that you had within an agency. So I want to be able to help you get those by having these initial meetings. So that's why meetings are vital. Let's talk about understanding how someone decides to meet with you. So what I mean by this is you're trying to get a meeting with somebody in the federal government, a federal buyer at whatever level, right? Whether it's a small business professional, somebody from the acquisition or procurement shop, like a contracting officer, or the program shop, right? The program office. When you're trying to have a meeting, you know what you think you look like. You know what you want. You've been thinking about it for a little bit. You've been doing research and targeting, right? You know, and have been thinking about this person for a while, but they don't know you from Adam. Theoretically, right? We'll talk about how to even address that. But theoretically, they don't know you. They're going to get an email or a phone call or whatever from you. And so I want you to understand, what is it like when I get that from you? Imagine I'm a federal buyer and you sent something to me and you're basically trying to ask me for a meeting. So the first thing that happens is, let's use an email as an example. You're sending me an email and you're trying to get a meeting with me. The first thing is name recognition, right? When I look at my inbox and I'm cruising through there, I'm looking on the left-hand side, and do I recognize the name? If I don't recognize the name, there's already a level of friction. And if I pause for 1 second and go to the side here on a box, in sales, you want to reduce the friction between you and the buyer, between you and the person you want to reach. And so everything that you do that begins to warm them up on this slide and the next slide that I'll talk about is designed to reduce the friction, make it easier to slide right into that meeting and to be able to talk to each other and have a good conversation. So the first thing is name recognition. They don't have to know you like they know, President Biden or Tony Robbins or somebody, right? They don't need that level of name recognition. I just need any name recognition. So an example is, I'm going to use an example here, but I've got somebody is a past customer and his friend, his name's Tim. When Tim comes in, I go, oh, there's Tim. And I see it. And that's enough for me to recognize, well, let me look at the next part, right? Let me look at the subject line. And the subject line needs to be something quick and easy. We have less than a second to decide whether we want to click on that thing now or not, right? So part of it is, do I even want to click on it at all and just cruise on? Or if it's from my friend Tim, I might go, do I want to click on it now or look at it later? So if it begins with forward, then I'll look at it later maybe. But if it's like, hey, introduction or something, I'm like, oh, let me look at that. So your subject line needs to be direct enough so that the other person knows what you want. I personally prefer introduction call as a subject line, introduction meeting, and something simple like that. You can decide what to do. When I work with my customers, depending on who they are and who they're trying to reach, we tweak that a little bit, but it is never salesy. It is never, social media type copy that you might hear out there. You've got to remember your audience is a federal buyer. They're the most conservative buyers out there. They move kind of very methodically because their mission isn't tied to profits and money. It's tied to safety and healthcare, defense of the country, things like that. So those subject lines don't need to be catchy and spammy. They need to be really direct about what you want. So the next thing they do when they're coming down, they maybe recognize your name. They kind of like the subject line. When they click on it and they see that message, it needs to be concise, right? You don't need to sit there and have a long email. One mistake we make that I definitely want to make sure you get rid of is don't tell people about you or about your company. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care, and they can't possibly know that until they meet with you. Some mistakes we make sometimes is we kind of rattle off what our core capabilities are, et cetera. What you need to do is to only be reaching out to people that it makes sense that you should be meeting with them. And then your message, the body of your email, should be concise enough that you can say, give them a reason on why they should meet with you. And I'll give you some tips in the next slide. So they got an email before they even respond to you. Often they want to just check you out. Who is this person, right? And so I said, first, be known, be direct, and then be concise. That's your email message. Now they're going to go check you out on LinkedIn. And the reason we go to LinkedIn is because it tells us so much more about you than if I went to your website. So when I go to LinkedIn, I want you to be in their network. And right here on the slide, I put, don't be connected, right? It's not a connection that I want you to have. I want you to be in their network. And what I mean by this is sometimes I get people reach out to me and they want to connect with me or talk with me. But when I look, we have 0 connections in common. I'm connected to 23,000 people. It's really hard for you not to be connected to me, right? And so if you're not connected to me, there's a really good chance you're way outside my network and outside the GovCon space where I want to play. Other times I connect with people, or I go look at them on LinkedIn and I can see we have 100 connections in common. I've connected with people. When I look, there's 1,000 connections we have in common because we both have thousands of connections, right? That gives me and the federal buyer confidence that, hey, we're in the same world. Maybe it makes sense for me to just do a quick intro call, right? And so that's what I mean by being in the network. When they look at you on LinkedIn, not only do they like you on LinkedIn, separate training, but they see that we have people in common, and maybe it makes sense for us to meet. The next thing is the website, right? Somebody looks at you on LinkedIn, they're going to pop over really quick to your website. Make sure your website's it doesn't have to have a ton, but it has to really quickly communicate what your company does, because I'm deciding whether I want to meet with you to talk with you, right? And when I go to your website, it shouldn't say you do everything. It should be pretty tightly down. And so if you haven't seen my training before on how to have clear, concise offers to make sure your core competency is focused, go watch that training. It's similar to how at the very beginning of this training, I said, what is your core competency? Put 2 or 3 words into the chat. If you can't put 2 or 3 words about your core competency, then I would submit you haven't tried to really bring it down, right? Bringing it down tight. And then the last thing is, in that message that you sent in the email, they're going to come back to, what is that ask? And the ask needs to be something easy to say yes to. So the reason I put this here, and what I was really trying to drive at, is don't ask for an hour meeting. Don't ask for an in-person meeting. Really, what you should be asking for is a 15-minute meeting. Literally within 5 or 10 minutes, you and they can decide whether it's a good fit, right? If you run your meeting smartly, right? Meaning follow an agenda, get in there, get out. You can have a 15-minute meeting and both of you can learn a lot about the other one and decide whether a second meeting makes sense. But when you say, hey, just seeing if you got 15 minutes, time for a quick 15-minute meeting, that makes it easy for them to say yes to. They're like, well, it's not a big investment, right? I don't have to worry about 30 minutes. I certainly don't have to think about an hour or getting you through security and all that other stuff. Never, ever ask for an in-person meeting in the beginning. In-person meetings are for people you have relationships with already. If it's brand new, don't waste their time and your time with an in-person, because not only is it a waste of time, but it actually makes it harder for them to say yes to you. So let's talk about really the purpose of today's training, right? Is what's the one thing you can do that'll help you start having meetings faster and with federal buyers and getting in the door more, right? And really that one thing is to follow a process, follow a proven process. I don't want you to wing it. Too many of us just come in and we figure out, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that today, I'm going to go around. It's like, no. When we sell our companies, if you're big enough, and you've been around enough, you must know what CMMI is or ISO, these process certifications that companies get saying we follow a certain process. Well, you should be doing the same thing with sales, right? You should be doing the same thing with a meeting. There should be a process. You shouldn't just wing it and do it different every time. You should have a process that you define and you keep doing it and refining it until you go, that works. Then you start getting really good at it, right? So it's really important you don't wing it, but you follow a proven process. And I teach a proven process. Down below here, I teach it. And I teach it in many other trainings you can go watch. I teach how to do cold calls, etc. So there's no excuse for you to not know it, because I've taught it for free and I have taught it from many different angles. So go, please take the training. The second thing is don't half bake it. Don't put it into the oven, like a cake. Don't put it in the oven and then pull it out and go, oh, this sucks, and throw it away. It's like it's the same liquid I poured into the pan when I put it into the oven. And I pull it out, it's the same thing, except for it's warm or hot, but it's not a cake. I wanted a cake. Well, that's because you half baked it, right? And don't half bake your process. Don't sit there and reach out to somebody and try to get a meeting and then not continue with the process. And the process is not, I'm going to call them or email them, try to get a meeting. And if I don't get it, I'm going to move on. It's like, well, that's not a process. That's the start of a process. That's the first thing you're doing. And so When you think about trying to cook up a meeting, make sure you bake it full. Don't half bake it. And the last thing is don't give up, right? This is a big one. The answer is always yes, unless it's no. So don't give up on behalf of the other person. In sales, I've been doing this a long time, 30 years, right? And in sales, we say, never say no for the customer. Make them say it. And that's why I say the answer is always yes or maybe. It's never no unless they say no. More often than not, the answer is, oh yeah, I've been meaning to get back to you. Sorry, I didn't, right? And so don't give up on that process of reaching out to people. An example is this ice cube I got over on the right-hand side, right? When you think about an ice cube at 32 degrees, it's this magical spot, right? It's frozen and melting at the same time kind of thing. But at 31 and below, it absolutely is just ice. It's a frozen square of ice here. And so imagine this ice cube sitting in a container where we can control the heat from outside or something, and it's 0 degrees in there. And we start turning the knob up to get the heat going. So we turn it from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We're starting to increase the heat on that thing, and we're watching, we're waiting for something to happen. We're going up 7, 8, 9, 10 degrees. We've gone from 0 to 10, and we're looking, and still nothing really appears to be happening, right? As you continue to turn that knob, you're going from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25 degrees. You just went from 0 to 25, a 25 increase in the temperature, or a 25 degree increase in the temperature, and no change to that ice. You look at it, looks exactly the same. I've been working on this, turning the heat up, nothing's happening. I go to 27, 28, 29, 30 degrees, and still nothing's happening. How long do I got to work at this, right? And you hit 31, nothing happens. But when you hit 32, that's where the magic happens. There's a great book called Atomic Habits where he lays out this analogy that's a great analogy. It's not the first time that it's ever been said, but he says it beautifully, this idea that the magic happens at 32 degrees. When you hit 32 degrees, you're looking at this ice cube that is an ice cube that is melting. It's going from solid to water, right? You can keep going. You can get it to gas even. The idea is you've got to keep going with it. Don't give up. Sometimes it looks like what you're doing is achieving no results, but it is. It's just incrementally working forward in your process, whatever it is, but especially as it relates to trying to get a meeting, get to 32 degrees before you start giving it a true evaluation, right? Know what 32 degrees is for your process of setting a meeting. Okay, so I wanted to kind of wrap up here with giving you some tips on getting in and some of the process here. One of the big things about trying to get a meeting is to make sure you're realistic. Don't knock on doors that aren't going to open. And even if they did, you wouldn't know what to say. You really wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. You get in there, you'd have the meeting, you walk out and you go, oh, it's like the president of the United States, for example. I don't care which party, it doesn't matter. I never want to meet them. Why would I want to meet them? What I want to do is meet the people who actually control the money. So an example is contracting officers. Those are really good people to meet because they sign contracts, right? OSDVOs are another perfect one. I never want to meet OSDVOs. I like them, right? Some of them are really nice, but they don't deal with contracts. They deal with policy and trying to make sure they're running all the small business professionals across their agency. What I want to meet are small business specialists. They work side by side with contracting officers to support the internal mission and try to figure out how to utilize small businesses like you in their agency. And so understanding the right people to meet. If I think about the C-suite, an example of the C-suite is a chief information officer or a chief human resources officer. I don't really want to meet them. What I want to do is meet their direct reports. One tip is if you ever get a chance to talk to a CIO or a chief HR officer, then you might ask them, hey, I know you're really busy. Can I meet with your direct reports? It probably makes more sense for me to meet your direct reports. This is why I say research is the very first step of the 7-step process, because when you look at a CIO, and if you had done your research, you would know who the direct reports are. You would know the divisions and branches within that federal agency under that C-suite, that chief executive officer or division head, et cetera. When you know the organizational structure, you know who's lower down on the rung, and you can begin to drive meetings towards those people. And those are more realistic. More realistic because you'll get in the door, but also more realistic because they're closer to the actual work that you want to contract on, right? So if you do painting or if you do cybersecurity, it doesn't matter. You want to be meeting with the people who basically would be your day-to-day bosses. And the CIO or the C-suites are not going to be those people. So 4 tips I have here on the actual way that I would reach out when I'm looking to reach out to especially federal buyers who are in more the program office area is engage with them on LinkedIn. Start that process I talked about, name recognition, right? Being known. Start that process by engaging on LinkedIn, not just on linked, which is apparently what I wrote. Be engaged on LinkedIn, right? Be out there. I said thumbs up. You can put a comment on. If you target people who are actually in your core competency, but a federal buyer side, you're going to have something to talk about. I'm talking with some people about artificial intelligence solutions, et cetera, on the industry side, but I'm going to talk to these very same people on industry and say, let's go talk to the government because there's a lot of need they have, but they really don't know how to figure it out, right? And so being engaged on LinkedIn, I can start getting some of these people I might want to meet with at an agency my name by engaging with them about, oh, I wonder how AI fits in here. Maybe this or something. Just getting my name on the radar is more than enough to get them to start knowing me. And then the process I follow, and I'll show you this more in a second, is whenever I try to reach out to somebody, I always leave a voicemail. I was talking to a customer the other day and they said, no, I just call and hang up. I'm like, no. Call and leave a voicemail. The best part about the government is most of them don't answer the phone, but they listen to their voicemail. So when you call and leave a voicemail, now they get to hear your voice. There's no pressure to have to talk with you, but they can hear you talk. You in a 30-second message, you can establish credibility and a professionalism and, Neil sounds nice enough kind of thing, but they recognize my name. I say it at the beginning, I say it at the end. Then number 3, I follow up with an email a few hours later. And in that email, I have what I call a teaser and an ask. And so a teaser, an example is, I've got a customer who's working with a large prime. It's not this, but let's say it's Lockheed. I might tease in saying, hey, we've been working, let's say the Navy. We've been working with the Navy for a while in this buying command, and I'd love to talk to you about your buying command. So that's the teaser. The ask is, can I get a 15-minute meeting? Are you free Tuesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. kind of thing? If you've seen my training on cold calls, you're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to almost check. Sure, let's have a meeting. And then the 4th step that I have here goes to don't give up, right? Here's a 30-day plan for getting meetings with people who maybe don't get back to you right away. What I call elusive federal buyers, right? And this handout, you can get a copy of this handout, but it lays out a 30-day approach, right? For us federal sellers, when we're going in, we need to have some sort of plan. And so if you look here, you can see me laying out what to do on day 7 or day 8, day 11, day 16. I'm saying how to do this staggering approach. And when you begin to get this process in place, you'll stumble a little bit in the beginning, but pretty soon you'll get into this rhythm. And then you might begin to figure out how to automate it where you've got a solid second voicemail and third voicemail. You know what to say. You know what your email is going to say because it's a template. You always customize it for the person you're talking to, but you don't have to think about what it says. You know what it says. Hey, John, I want to raise this to the top of your inbox. I know you're busy. Love to catch up, blah, 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 right? I mean, when you start moving forward with the process, you really start getting good at this. And so if you want a copy of this, if you're a sustaining member, you can get this in the library. It's in there already as a PDF. Plus, there's a whole training around how to use this, et cetera, in the sustaining member for you. If you're not a sustaining member, just pause the screen and take a screenshot, right? You can get it right there. Okay, so here's what I want you to remember from today's training. In the old days, there was this line that in sales, it was always be closing, ABCs, right? Always be closing. What I want you to remember is always be meeting. In the federal government, we rarely close. We just keep meeting and having discussions and moving the sale forward, the understanding forward, and then we write a proposal and they evaluate it based on criteria. But you always want to be meeting people in your federal agency. That's how you start building those relationships. You can hear about opportunities, shape opportunities, and begin to get a better penetration into an agency. The second thing I want you to remember is be realistic when you're choosing a door. Don't go for the C-suite, go for the directors who will probably be your boss when you're there. And my task for you is just download that 30-day roadmap, put it on your wall and try it out for 30 days, 60 days, and see what your results are like when you start moving forward. If you're getting value from our training, throw thanks into the chat for the team, and then also consider becoming a sustaining member. When you're ready, we'd appreciate your support. For everybody, as you go into the weekend, remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.